Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. We help sales managers and leaders make more money, save time, and become kick-ass leaders of their sales teams. And that's what we're here to talk about on this podcast. We are here to give you the tools and tactics to build a well-oiled sales machine and teach you the mental toughness skills so you can show up confident, focused, emotionally in control, and ready to energize your team. It's time to talk sales leadership and mental toughness. Let's get into today's episode. Well, hello, everyone. It is Matt Phillips. Welcome to today's podcast episode. So excited to be with you today as we dive into an absolutely critical topic that I'm going to shift your perspective on from here on out. I want you to take a different approach because what we're here to talk about today, this concept of motivation, of motivating employees, getting more out of them. We have to start thinking, acting, behaving differently if we expect different results from our people. And that's what we're here to really dive into today and make sure that you are kind of locked and loaded for how you show up as a leader, again, to motivate your team. Now, it's interesting, I spend a lot of time with people talking about this concept, right? Of how do I motivate my people, right? And what's interesting, just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Tampa with one of the leadership teams that I work with, and this concept came up. And we ended up having this fabulous discussion about it because this can be seemingly a challenging thing, right? Because we want to do the right thing. We expect motivation out of people, right? We expect to hire people who just have that self-motivation. And then when things start happening that are out of alignment with that, we start getting concerned. And then the question comes up, well, but how do I need to motivate them? I need to motivate them more. And today what we're going to talk about, again, is going to shift your perspective on this entire concept. Now, as I was preparing for today, it was interesting. I was thinking of just stories, right? Because we've all experienced those in business and different parts of life where, we're trying to get more out of people. And it can be a challenging thing. And as I thought about stories, my mind immediately went to sports. And I know most of you know my sports background, playing collegiate baseball, professional baseball overseas. I played a variety of different sports growing up. And of course, because of that, I've had many, many coaches along the path, right? Some have been excellent, some have been in the middle, some have been not so good as I reflect back. But one of the things that I noticed when being coached by these other individuals, because by the way, side note, you as a leader in your organization, you are a coach, right? You're here to coach your people, just like an athletic coach, get the most out of them. All right, away from a side note now, but one thing I've noticed was when I look back, the coaches that I had, a lot of them were yellers. Right? Have you ever had that yeller coach? Right. So every time you did something wrong, you would just get yelled at, right? Or the perception of getting yelled at. And I had a lot of coaches like that. Well, one thing that I have learned over time, and because, part of my business too, we have the student athlete leadership program. And so I get to interact with a ton of coaches now. Well, as I've studied them and the psychology behind it and all these things, one thing, here's what I've noticed. People typically coach the way they were coached. Right. So if you had a coach who yelled at you or a leader who yelled at you, typically that's how it was modeled. So if we're not careful, we think sometimes that is right. And that's how we coach others. That's how we lead others. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying we have to start looking at things differently if we want to truly get the most out of the individuals we work with. And part of it is just understanding that hey, you know what? Someone might have modeled this for me, parent, coach, leader, whatever. And I might be taking this on. It might be good. It might be bad. I just need to take a step back for a moment and look at it and figure out, is this the best for the individuals on my team now in business? And that's why this is so important, right? Of what we're here to talk about. And I could tell you story after story about this, right? I mean, my goodness, I'll tell you a college story real quick. It was my sophomore year at Creighton. And we weren't that good of a team that year. We were like 500. I can't remember what our exact record was, but we ended up like 24-24, right? 24 wins, 24 losses. I don't remember exactly what it was, but we were a 500 team. And it was interesting because when we lose a game, the coaches would talk for a long time after the game. I mean, they would talk and, saying the same thing over and over again. And we'd sit there and just be respectful and all that sort of stuff. But when we started winning games, my junior and senior year, all of a sudden, like the post game talk was really short. And so I joke when I say this, but that was kind of our motivator of like, my gosh, like if we win, then the coaches don't talk that much, right? And off we go. We get to go, I don't know, go hang out with friends or get back to the dorms or like just do nothing. And so that became our motivator, right? Of like, wow, let's win again. So we don't have to hear a long post game, speech by the coaches. And it's funny because I see that today in coaches that I work with, that we tend to, as coaches, talk longer and longer and longer, because that, again, was what was modeled for us. So we take on the same actions, which, again, may or may not serve us. We have to figure that out. And we'll talk about those two things here in a minute with you. But here's the other thing I want to shift your perspective on, right? So once you have this awareness, I'll give you some tactics here in a little bit. But when I get the question asked of like, how do I motivate my team? My response, and maybe this sounds, I don't know, counterintuitive or different or something like that, but what if I were to tell you that motivating your team is a complete waste of time, right? Trying to figure out how to motivate your team is a complete waste of time. And here's why I say that, right? So first of all, you have zero influence over their motivation, right? Because that comes from within, right? Second, motivation is fleeting. It's here one moment, gone the next, right? We've all watched that, YouTube video or search YouTube videos for, motivation, and, the things with, The Rock or Denzel Washington come up and they're giving these amazing speeches. And man, we get done with that video and we're like, oh, I'm going to go conquer the world. I'm going to run through that wall. I'm going to do all these amazing things. And then we find that a little later on, we are back doing the things that we were doing before, or we have that brief moment of motivation followed by feeling unmotivated again, right? Have you ever felt that before? Like, I certainly have. Right? I've had certain jobs where I just, it's sit there and I'm like, I just don't like what I'm doing right now. And I'm in this pity party, feeling completely unmotivated. And then I pull up YouTube and watch that video. And then I have this fire inside me and I go crank out work. And then I get done with that work. And then I'd be back to like, but I just don't like what I do. And this is tough. And this vicious cycle that occurs. Now, motivation is not something that, I don't know, we're going to be 100% motivated all the time and like going at this huge energetic level. But when you take a step back for a moment, I guess the question that's popping in my head right now is like, what does motivation even look like? Like, what is it? Like, how do we know if someone's motivated or they're not? And I think that's a good question to ask, right? Because this is part of what I teach people is, we all carry around these perceptions of what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what someone looks like when they're motivated versus someone who is unmotivated. And the biggest thing I find with leaders is that we don't really define like what that looks like. And that's such a key part, right? If you've heard my other podcasts, I talk about these concepts that we use as they're so general and generic that we kind of know what they mean, but we don't really know what they mean. So when I say like, be a great leader, you sit there and you're like, okay, Matt, I'll be a great leader. And in the back of your mind, you're like, I have no idea what this dude means, right? I have no idea what he means. So like, does he mean like show up early, stay later, walk around the office faster so I appear busier? Like, what do you mean? Same thing with like, I want to be, mentally tough. I want to be resilient. Okay, great. Get back up after you've been knocked down. But that's pretty much all I really know of it to be, right? How do you build it? How do you do this? How do I know when I look at someone that they are mentally tough, right? We have to dive into these things and define it. And the same thing is true of motivation. What does it look like? And right off the bat, I'm here to tell you right now, your perception, your picture that you're painting in your head is 100% different than the person that you manage and that you lead. It is. Because what they think looks like motivation is different than yours. And again, I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. I'm just saying understand that there is a divergence in what people think motivated looks like. And that's why the first step in like understanding this, right? What leads us to ask that question of like, how do I motivate my team the first step is to define what it looks like. Like when you look at that person, what do you see that tells you they are motivated? And then you have to take that and then communicate that to that person, right? You feel me on that? I'm sure you've had bosses in the past that have come to you and like said something of like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? You don't seem that motivated lately. And in your mind, sometimes you're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm working my behind off over here. Like, I don't know what you're seeing versus what I'm seeing, but I don't know why you're asking that question. Now, sometimes it's legitimate, right? And you're like, yeah, got it. But there's sometimes where, again, our perceptions are off. The stories that we're all making up and telling ourselves are off. And we've got to start aligning those things. And that's one of the key parts of motivating people is you have to be willing to sit down and start painting the picture and communicating the picture. Like if you were to create a movie or paint a picture of like, this is what it looks like. So when I'm thinking motivated, this is what I see, right? One thing we talked about was like, what does motivation not look like? That's another way to approach it, right? Maybe they're not prepared for meetings. Again, set expectations. You have a meeting agenda. So if you don't have the meeting agenda, that tells me something's off. Maybe not that you're not motivated, but maybe you just got busy. I don't know what that means, but like, what are the expectations that we want to set for our team? That goes all the way back to that leadership philosophy. Like check out that other podcast that we have. But that's part of what we need to start understanding and diving into and painting that picture for people, right? So when I'm playing baseball, if a coach were to come up to me and be like, what's going on? Right? And maybe he or she says like, you don't seem motivated. Well, coach, what do you mean? Right? I'm putting the work. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Well, Matt, like you're showing up right on time every time. You show up to practice right on time. And actually you're a few minutes late because then you got to put your cleats on, you got to get your glove on and then head out so you're actually like a few minutes late. So that tells me that you're not mentally prepared for what we're about to do. So when I talk about motivation, Matt, or doing the best or doing these things, my expectation is that you're there 15 minutes early. So that way when I blow the whistle for practice, that it's like, we get up and go. That we're prepared for that. So now as an athlete, I look at that and I'm like, okay, what the coach is telling me is be there 15 minutes early, right? That's the expectation. So I'm going to meet, well, I guess I'm going to choose, but I'm kind of a rule follower, but it's like, I'm going to meet that expectation of that coach. I'm going to be there 15 minutes early. And then by default, I am going to learn something. I'm going to be more mentally prepared. So that coach can paint that picture for me of what that looks like. And that way, when the picture, movie, whatever is off, then you can have a discussion around of like, hey, like something's off. Like I was expecting to see this, or this is what you've done in the past. And now this is what it's looking like. Now we can have a discussion about it. And that's what I think, the best leaders do is kind of set that expectation and paint that picture. And then just understand the situation that person is in to really understand, like, are they motivated or not? Again, whatever that means.
For all you sales managers and leaders out there, I wonder if you've ever thought the phrase, why in the world did I sign up for this? I know I have. And the reality is that leading a team of salespeople can be challenging, right? Just figuring out how to motivate each person and keep the pipeline full and just dealing with the pressure of delivering the month after month results that your company's requiring. And call me an optimist, but amidst the challenge, amidst sometimes the frustration, we have this opportunity in front of us to really impart our knowledge, right? And to leave that legacy on our team and just achieve next level results. And that's why today I want to personally invite you to our free masterclass training, where I'm going to share the exact secrets, the exact framework that I teach sales leaders around North America to help just take you to next level results for you and your team. And it's actually the exact framework that I taught one of my clients who over a 12-month period tripled organic revenue growth and increased margin by 30%. So I want to invite you to that masterclass. You can click the link below or head over to mattphillipscoaching.com/webinar, and can't wait to see you in the training.
So that's where I want your mind to go of like, are you as a leader doing the right things to paint that picture for people? I mean, that's why we spend so much time in the sales manager leadership program and other programs that we have, going through and diving into the leadership philosophy. And it's not just like this philosophical thing. It's like, what are the actions that we expect to see of our people? What's it going to look like to get the best out of them? right? Because we know that like motivation is going to go up and down and in and out based on what's going on at work and home. But how do we hone in and kind of optimize what each person is doing? And it starts with painting that picture. So that's that first thing I wanted you to really to say to you and have you hear, because that's such a key part of leadership. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about in this leadership side of things is this concept we call know your customer. And I'm sure if you're in sales, you're familiar with that. Know your customer, right? If like, I need to know if I'm going after a prospect or a client, I need to know everything about them, right? Their buying or their buying process. I need to know who the players are. I need to know who the decision makers are. I need to know if they like dogs or cats. Like I need to know everything about them so that I can influence them to make a decision, hopefully transact with our company. And there's this gap I see, right, when we talk about motivation of like, again, going back to that statement about coaches, right? We typically lead and motivate based on what was modeled to us before. And like I said, it's easier to yell to an entire group or motivate people in general because it just takes less time. But I'm telling you, that will not get you where you want to go. And that's what I see every single day, right? Every individual is different. And I'm telling you right now, how you are motivated versus how I am motivated, night and day different, right? Maybe it's the same, but I bet it's different. And I think back to different coaches that I've had. And I remember Anthony Pirano was my private hitting coach in high school and lives actually not too far from me to this day. And Anthony and I would go out. My dad would always be there shagging balls, stuff like that. And but he would throw to me often in the batting cage. And what was interesting is I was there because I wanted to get better, right? So I wanted the best out of me. And there were some days, though, where I wasn't hitting that well or didn't feel that motivation, if you will. And I don't know if he ever did this on purpose. I don't think he did. Maybe I should ask him one day. But there were certain circumstances where he'd throw a ball kind of at me, right? And he was he wasn't the best pitcher for batting practice, but there were some that would get away from him. They come like right at me or right at my feet and stuff. And so I'd have to jump up and get out of the way. And what I found is when that happened, it kind of made me a little bit angry. And what was fascinating for me is that when that happened, my focus would just get locked in. And I don't know if it was probably channeling that anger into like, I'm going to try to hit him back with this ball. It sounds terrible. Good Lord. Can't believe I'm saying that. But it's like, how do I almost hit him back with that ball? And I'm going to crush this thing when he's starting to throw it in there. But I got hyper focused in that moment. And so what I found is like sometimes when I come from this place of frustration or anger or something like that, my effort goes up exponentially. I remember when I was playing a pickup soccer game in Switzerland with some coworkers one day, and we were kind of messing around, and this guy, kicked the ball and it hit me right in the face, and I got a little bit irritated and angry. And boy, I was flying around the field after that because I channeled that into focus and energy and taking it out. And so sometimes what I found is when I'm, I don't know, yelled at a little bit, or these things kind of, I don't know, they get me a little bit fired up. That's when I know like it's time to go to work. Like I'm going to crank stuff out now. Well, that's one way to motivate me, right? I'm also motivated by very positive things, right? No, like you're doing great, Matt, all those sort of stuff. I will tell you though that I get a lot more done when I'm angry. So it's super interesting, right? We're different. I had this one client that I was working with one-on-one. He was a financial advisor. Financial advisor at the time. That's right. We got hooked up when he was a financial advisor. And the reason we started working together was he's just like, I'm not motivated at all. And I don't like my job. And like, I need something new. So I need some help with this sort of stuff. So we started working together. Well, one of my conversations I remember, but in particular, I'm like, okay, tell me about a time when you were just operating at your best. And he brought up college football. He was a college quarterback. I said, okay, that's awesome. And so he was super excited telling me all these stories, right? And I said, well, like, tell me about, like, at that time, like, how did the coaches like motivate you, get the best of you? Like, what was happening like in these situations? And one thing he brought up that I thought was very interesting, he goes, and he actually said, Matt, this is going to sound weird, but he said, I loved when my coaches would yell at me. And I'm like, really? I'm like, so tell me more about that. And he said, it would just like, they'd come at me, get in my face a little bit, and I would like channel that into being my best. And I was like, oh, it's so interesting. Again, some people don't like that, right? Some people do. Well, I thought that was super interesting, right? And so then I asked him about his job, and I said, okay, so tell me about like your role now and what you're doing. And there was one other component to this, which I won't go into today, but the one thing he brought up was, I said, you have a boss? He said, you have a boss. And I'm like, how often do you see him? He's like, once a month. And I said, well, tell me what the meetings are like. And it's just like a review of his book of business, right? With his prospects, stuff like that. So I said, I know this is going to sound different, but I said, if you know you're motivated in a certain way, you have every right and actually kind of an obligation to go to your boss and say, like, listen, if I'm going to get the best out of myself, there's certain things I need you to help hold me accountable to, or approach me a certain way to make that happen. And laying that out for your boss, right? So for this gentleman, it meant meeting more frequently with his boss and having a discussion of like, he doesn't need to get yelled at every meeting, of course, like every week, but it's an intense amount of accountability for this individual because that's what he needed to get the best out of him. And again, as leaders, I think sometimes we have to adopt motivational techniques, if you will, or approaches based on what's going to get the most out of each individual, not the general team. And we have to have this awareness. And that's why this know your customer, know your team concept that we teach in our programs is so critical. It's diving down and starting to ask questions around like, how are you best motivated? How do you best like to be recognized? Like, how do I get the most out of you? Where if I see something off, that I can come to you, and how do I come to you, and what do I say, and when do I say it, and what's my voice inflection, right? And we think that's sometimes odd as leaders, but that's the critical piece. Asking the questions and then doing what our people said. Leadership, I think sometimes we overcomplicate. Motivation, I think sometimes we overcomplicate when the answer is sitting right in front of us. It's painting the picture of what it looks like, and then having a conversation around that. It's asking people what they need and then delivering on what they need. It's like keeping a little spreadsheet and making sure we've written it down, typed it out, so that, again, I consider myself a pretty fairly intelligent person, but I have to go back and look at some of the stuff of like, oh gosh, how does this person need to be motivated? Oh yeah, that's right. Then I deliver on that. So I want you to understand that a couple of things out of today, that like, one, when that question pops up of like, how do I motivate my team? I want you to remember for a minute that Matt Phillips, I think it's a waste of time, right? It's fleeting. It's here one moment, gone the next. Instead, it's how do we make sure that we are painting the picture for our team? How are we making sure that we are asking the right questions so that we can optimize the performance of every team member? And having those conversations and accountability and calling people out around these sorts of things becomes absolutely critical. That's the game changer. That's the difference maker in my mind. Now, I could probably go on and on for another 30, 40, 50 hours on this topic, but that's some of the big stuff I really wanted to talk to you about today, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference. So hopefully that gives you some thoughts and some actions you can take away and just get you thinking differently about this concept that I know are facing every single day. Now, before we wrap up for today, I do want to highlight, this is one of three kind of big topics that I'm focused on right now in my business. And if you have interest in learning more about not only the motivation side of things, but also these two other kind of areas that can be absolute game changers from a leadership perspective, right? To help grow sales and get the best, like optimize the performance of your team. Head on over to mattphillipscoaching.com/webinar and sign up. We've got a free 60-minute training there that will give you some, greater insights into this topic, things that you can take away and utilize with your team. So you can head over there and check that out, please. So with that, my motivated listeners and friends and leaders, go continue to crush today. I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the week, and just continue doing the things that you know are going to separate you from everyone else. That's where great leadership is born. Have a great day, and we will see you on the next podcast. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that unstoppable, rock solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator, mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.